quite some more people on this room than I expected, so a little bit pressure for my first ever Odoo experience talk, but hopefully should be fine at the end and you're going to learn something. My name is Nicola. I'm a digital advisor team leader at Odoo, and I started working in the company in December 2019. And if there's one thing I learned to hate in the last almost 5 years, it's a bad start to a project, so a bad kickoff call, as we call it in Odoo. And sadly, I think everybody at Odoo has already this experience, especially if you're new. So today, hopefully after my session, you guys will do good kickoff calls and will never have the same problem as we did at the beginning in Odoo. Before we start, if you have questions, you can note them down in the pad. I think you know the drill by now. You can take a picture real quick or copy the link of the pad, and then afterwards we're gonna have a look into it, and we can also go around here with the microphone if you have any questions on site. I'm gonna let you a few more seconds. I see still a few cameras up, and then we can start. So let's start talking about implementation. No, before we start talking about implementation, actually, as you heard in the talk before, we decided to go with the building a house methodology or analogy, because basically everything we do is, everything we do at Odoo when we're implementing a project can be linked to the building of a house, basically. So you're going to hear a few examples throughout my talk about that. Now, let's start talking about implementation. When we implement a project, you heard it before, what is the most important thing? We want the client to go live as soon as possible and also to stay inside the budget, right? So this is basically our main idea whenever we implement a project. As you heard as well in the talk before, we have a name for that. We name that our quick start methodology. And basically, whenever we ask ourselves a question at Odoo how we can do something for a project, we can answer it with, okay, we're going to do it the way quick start should do it. So we're going to go live as soon as possible and in budget. And actually, the implementation, as you heard before, starts not with implementing with the client directly, but with the first phase, the kickoff phase. And when we're talking about the kickoff phase, we can basically ask ourselves 4 questions. We can ask, what is the kickoff phase? Well, actually 4 of those questions, 2 out of those 4 questions are pretty easy to answer, the what and the why. What is a kickoff call? A kickoff call is the start of the project. So basically, once the sales has signed the contract with the customer, we're going to start the kickoff process. So why do we do the kickoff call? As you heard before, it's also pretty easy. We want to ensure a good implementation afterwards, which should be quick start. The how, however, is not that easy to answer, and is basically what today's talk is going to be all about. So how can we do a kickoff call, or how do we do our kickoff call at Odoo? When we do a kickoff call, we can split it basically up into 2 different parts. We have the internal kickoff call and the external kickoff call. The internal kickoff call being with the salesperson that signed the project, and the external kickoff call being with the client or the person that is going to implement the project on the other side. Now, I could just continue for, I'd say, 50 more minutes explaining what it is, but rather than that, we had the idea to do a little, let's say, role play. So Heloise is going to be the person that the salesperson for the internal kickoff, and also the customer for the external kickoff call. All right. So internal kickoff call, as I mentioned, Heloise sold the project to the customer, and we're going to do the internal kickoff call now. Hello, Heloise. How are you doing?
Hey. Well, super cool. Thank you, Nicola.
Yeah. Almost Odoo experience coming up, right?
Yeah, sure. A lot of fun, a lot of work.
Yeah, true. Before we do that, then I would still like to discuss with you the project you sold. So when you signed the project with the client and you did like the demo to him, can you explain me a bit more about the client? Like, how was he?
Yeah, so it's true that, I had several calls with that client. The meetings were good. There were actually 2 persons in the calls that we had together, and I would say one of them was not IT friendly at all.
Okay, good to know. Thanks for the heads up. And when we're talking about their workflow, like, can you explain to me how they basically make money when you start from the beginning to the end?
Yeah, sure. So they sell IT services. So basically what they do is that they do cold calling. And when they have a client that is interested, well, they will, of course, supply them with the hardware. I think, if I remember well, they have 3 different suppliers. Mm-hmm. And so once the hardware, well, they go deliver it to the client, they do the installation, and then I think, the invoice after. So the invoice comes after the delivery and the installation.
Okay, I see. So you dug quite deep with him and you have a lot of information. I think that's everything I need for the beginning. I will plan my kickoff call with the customer now, and then I'll let you know once I had him on the line, and I'll give you an update after that.
Okay, let me know, thanks.
All right, thank you. So basically what we just did is a breakdown of a sales kickoff call. Usually it can take between 50 minutes and an hour, depending on the scope of the project and the amount of information the sales gathered. But we have actually 3 goals for our kickoff call, and we try to always have an answer to those, or like a point about those 3 points. So first of all, the internal kickoff call serves the reason that we don't go blind into the external kickoff call with the client. Like, imagine the client, be on the client side. You did a call with a sales, you had like 4 meetings where explained everything that you do, you discussed the price, and then the consultant starts working with you, and you have to explain everything again. Then the mood of the client is going to be already at the bottom. He doesn't want to do the same thing again with you. So we try to go in there with already base knowledge. We can tell them, we know what you do, but we want to go further. We need more information than the salesperson to implement it. In a perfect world, of course, the salesperson would also be the person that does the implementation afterwards, but that's not always possible on the different types of company that you have. For example, at Odoo, we have different departments, the sales and the consulting department. Then the second point that's really important for us that we want to reach is we want to have structured questions, basically. So when we go into the call with the client, we don't just want to ask questions left and right, but we want to start basically from the beginning. We want to talk about, okay, how does the client make money? With what does he start? With what does he end? For example, she gave me an example that the invoicing comes at the end, he's going to buy products, etc., etc. So this kind of information can help us already structure our questions before. We always like to make like a flow chart, a basic flow chart before we get together with the client, so we can also teach the client or guide the client later on with what we want to have an answer from him, basically. And lastly, blocking points. It can sometimes happen that maybe during a sales call, the client forgot something to mention, or we didn't go far enough into a certain topic. And in that case, we, based on our experience, or when we were asked the right questions to the salesperson, we can see, there's something that you missed to mention maybe. And in that case, we have the chance to tackle that point directly at the kickoff call with the customer. Because it's better than if we see something that's not working right to mention it at the beginning, rather than do it in the 6th or 7th meeting during the implementation. So we try to find we try not to find blocking points, but if there are blocking points, we try to spot them and already tackle them from the first meeting of the implementation. All right. So after the internal kickoff call, we send a mail to the customer, and basically we schedule a meeting with him. Like Heloise and Richard said in the call before, we call it kickoff call, but it's not one call. It starts with one call. It can be way more than one call, depending on the scope of the client. All right. Now Heloise is going to be the customer, and I'm going to have the first meeting with my customer. Hello Heloise, how are you doing? My name is Nicola, and I will be implementing your project with you.
Hey, nice to meet you, Nicola.
Thank you. So basically, before we start today, or before we start implementing, we need to do 2 things. We need to find a way of working together, right? So that fits both you, me, and our quick start methodology. And we need to analyze your business so I get even more information than you already gave to the salesperson.
Okay, but I thought we would start working already.
We are working together already, but we're not implementing yet. So we can take the example of a house. If you're building a house, you want to talk first to the construction company and to the architect before you start building a house, right? You want to have an idea, and you want them to know what you do and what you want before building the house, right?
Yeah, okay, you're right. Let me hear it then.
I know that. All right, so basically we need to tackle 3 points first when we talk about the way of working. First of all, we need a single point of contact on your side. Basically, that's a person that will be responsible for the implementation on your side. Best case scenario, it's somebody who is IT friendly, it's someone who has a lot of time on their hands, can make decisions, and knows the company as well. We know it's quite a lot, but do you have someone in mind?
That is a lot to ask for, man, because time is a rare resource here.
We know.
But yeah, I think I can find someone. I'll figure it out.
All right, awesome. The next thing is important is the way we're going to really do the implementation later on. So the way we usually do it, we skip up the your workflow into smaller parts, and then we implement those parts one after another, meaning that I'll do the configuration in your test database, you're going to test it, you're going to come back to me with feedback, back and forth until your flow is perfect. Max is going to talk more about later on, so the next talk is about the MVP. Max down there, so you get more information about it later.
Okay, but we don't have that many hours on the pack, and also I'm a pro in accounting, so I could do it myself.
All right. What we could do then, what I could propose is that we do the MVP approach for your normal flows, like for inventory, sales, etc., and for accounting, we can do a Q&A approach. So I'm going to guide you through the points that you need to configure, but you're going to do the configuration on your own, on your spare time.
Okay, sounds good. You're the pro.
Awesome. Then the last point is we want to stick to standard, right? So you heard that Odoo is out-of-the-box solution, so we always try to avoid development if not necessarily, if not absolutely needed in the beginning. Imagine you're building a house, again the house analogy, and a nice garden is maybe not the first thing you want to do, right? You want to have like a roof over your head first.
Yeah, but I really, really like flowers.
I imagine that you like flowers, but I imagine you don't like being flooded out of your house when it rains, right? So a roof comes first, and then we see what we're going to do later on, right?
Yeah, okay, all right. I'm ready for next step then.
All right, so let's start the analysis part then. Okay, so the first part of the external kickoff call was finding the way of working. And basically, the most important thing when we're talking about that is we need to find a way of working that fits the client, that fits both the client and me and the Odoo implementation methodology, which is get everything live as soon as possible and on budget, right? So the thing at Odoo is we have our methodology, but we never do a copy-paste of the methodology for different clients. Each and every client works differently with us, and our goal is finding the perfect way for each and every client. So that's a really important point that sometimes we miss at the beginning. So finding the best way, in that case, for this client. For example, imagine you have like a consultant, like she said, a lot of different things are needed, but you have somebody who is IT friendly, who knows his way around about the company, who can take decisions, but he has like 2 hours a month time. Well, what should we do with a person like that? We cannot implement a project if he has only 2 hours a month, because it would take month after month to implement the project. So it might be better to have somebody who has maybe more time, is a bit less IT friendly, but we can work with that. We can teach him better, we can make tutorials for him. So we're going to find a way of working that fits this customer. Let's move on to the next part then, the second part of the external kickoff call, which is the analysis part, basically. So in here, we're going to focus on what the client is doing right now. All right, Eloise, so now that we defined our way of working together, I would like to discuss your company together. So I know your basic workflows, but yeah.
Yeah, so I want a software that would basically integrate with my other software.
Whoa, hold your horses. That's already a to-be solution. You're talking about things that you want. The goal of the analysis part is finding what you're doing right now. We want to talk about your as-is situation. Take the example of the house again. You're talking about something that you want, but what we need to do is we need to find something that we can implement first, something basic, a need to have, right? And the garden is not necessarily a need to have. So that we can, for that we can decide together what is a need to have. You need to explain to me what you're doing right now at the moment.
Okay, you're right again.
I know.
Then, what do you want to know?
All right, so what I want to know is, first of all, some basic information. So I know how you work, the sales explain to me, I know how your basic workflows are, but explain me maybe a bit about your employees. So we're starting broad, right? We're talking about your employees, who are your key people, what do they do? Then we can talk maybe about your numbers, like how many sales orders do you do? So we're starting really broad. And next point we're going to talk about is about your way of working. So there we're going to tackle each and every workflow you do, and we're going to start at the beginning at A, so for example, your acquisition of clients, and then we move to the end, the last point, which is, for example, the invoicing of the customers. Is that okay for you?
Perfect.
All right, then let's start with the analysis part. So analyzing, again, got my slide, let's act it out. All right, so when we're talking about analyzing, we have 3 points that we really want to touch when analyzing a company. The most important thing is we want to talk about the as-is situation. So we don't want to talk about what the client wants. Like Richard said before, we don't want to please the client, we want to find something that works for them. And to find something that works for them, we need to talk about the as-is situation. actually one of the hardest parts when doing that is always turning off your head and not thinking about Odoo in that moment. And one way of doing that is not talking about applications or not asking questions about applications, but stay in the as-is situation with the client and think about them right now. What are they doing? How do they make money? Basically, you can say yourself, what do I need to copy from them so I can build their company on my own? As soon as you know that, you're talking about workflows and not applications. Furthermore, when we talk about, for example, the sales flow can have more applications than just a sales app. You need to deliver products, so you need the inventory app, you need to invoice the products, so you need the invoicing app. So a workflow is always a bigger view and helps you to think about the as-is situation and not the to-be situation. And lastly, that's one really important point as well when we're doing the analysis part. We should always guide the client through the kickoff call. So we all had the case already with a customer that was really talkative, so he talked quite a lot, and we let them just run basically loose. If you do that, he's going to talk about the topic that he knows best first, and he's only going to mention the things that are in his head. But we want them to mention everything. We want them to talk about everything that there is in their company. If the person doesn't know everything in their company, then we need to get another one in the kickoff call, because most likely there is not one single person in a company that knows everything. But the most important part is that we tell them we want to start from the beginning. This helps wants us to analyze the company better and also the customer to explain something. If you tell them, explain me how you make money, they're going to say, yeah, I sell a product X, right? But we want to tell them, okay, before you sell it, who you sell it to? Where do you get your clients? What do you do with your clients once you get them? When you want to sell something, you need to have the product on stock, or do you buy it when you sell something? So we really try to go from the beginning, which is the first step in the process of making money, to the last step, which can be, for example, invoicing, accounting, or after sales, or whatever. The thing is, the analyzing itself, the asking questions, is not something you can learn with slides, right? We noticed that at the people that work for us, the new ones that join us, the more kickoff calls they do, the more kickoff phases they do, the better they get, right? So it can take sometimes 2 or 3 phases for them to be really good at analyzing a company. And that's not something that you can learn, but if you follow those 3 points, those 3 principles, you have already good baseline, so you always get the right information from the customer. And do not forget, this is only a small part of the implementation itself. So what we're doing here was we were trying to get the customer or to get the project ready to go. We were trying to start the implementation right. So with all the points that we discussed with Luis together, we are at one point ready to go with the implementation. You maybe remember in the beginning I had my 4 questions there, the what, the why, the how, and how is it linked to Quick Start. I think it's pretty clear now. Everything we do in the implementation serves one reason. The implementation afterwards, again, will be explained by Max, should be as fluid as possible, as fast as possible, and as secure as possible. So all the points we just discussed right now are going to help us with that. Are you ready to implement your project, Luis?
Let's go.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. Do we have already somebody here in the room with a question? Okay, not too many. That's good, because I spent already too much time talking. What would be the deliverable of the analysis phase? How far to go with putting things on paper, text versus schemes? That's actually a good question, because we just redefined our way of documenting things in Odoo. So like a year ago or something, we were always working with Google Docs, for example, or Sheets, or everybody had basically his own way of working. And now, as we have our own project app, of course, we're going to do everything on Odoo. So the way we handle the analysis part is we have not necessarily a list of prepared questions, because if you have prepared questions, you're just going to focus on that. And one important thing when you analyze something is, like, how do you say, active listening. So you need to listen what the client is saying, remember what he answered, and maybe come back to that later. So we don't prepare questions beforehand. What we can do is making as a baseline, so like I said, the scheme, we can draw the workflow once we had the call with the sales person to give us an idea. So we have like a start, an acquisition of the client. We write down a few notes. Then we have the next point, the next point, the next point. So we can make it visible. And during the kickoff call, we're going to complete it with more information based on what the customer is answering, basically. If you want to have an example, you can join me afterwards, and I can show you one. I don't have one right now with me on my computer, but I can show you one afterwards online. And text is also, of course, important, but it's always a bit depending on the person that's doing the kickoff call. Like, there are a lot of people that gather the information and can write it down in good sentences. More other people need to make it more visual. But what's for us the most important thing internally at Odoo is, if you write down something, it needs to be written in a way that the person after you can take it over. So, for example, if you need to give the project to another person, we want to have a handover document. We want to have the information in a file so everybody can understand it and get the customer or get the information at work as fluent as possible with the customer. What happens when the customer asks for integration from the beginning, and if the salesperson cannot sell Odoo without integration that the customer is asking for? Should we send this as a lost opportunity? Not necessarily. It depends on what the integration is like. The first thing we do is we have a thing called pre-sales service. So basically our salespeople can create a ticket, and then we as consultants are going to answer the question for them and tell them what they can do. So if they have a question about a way of working, or for example this question, they come to us and we can discuss with them together. So in this case, I would say the first thing we would need to do is talk to the customer and say, do you really need it, or can you do it in Odoo? Because oftentimes they want to have an integration with, I don't know, their e-commerce, for example. I had the case, they wanted to have an integration with the e-commerce, but we could do everything and more on our web shop. They just didn't want to go like the extra mile on the side of the customer to implement Odoo as well. And at the end, we convinced him that Odoo is the way to go instead of an integration. Because if you use an integration, and that's also a big point where we can convince customers, it is really expensive to do them and to develop, and especially if we need to maintain them afterwards. So we try to first of all see if it's needed, and if not, if we can do it some other way. And if it is really needed for the customer, then we're always up for discussion. So we don't say no by default. If we see it as reasonable and we can develop it for them, then why not? That's something I maybe forgot to or didn't emphasize enough earlier. Developments, we try to avoid developments if they are unnecessary. But if, for example, the house example, the roof would be a development, well, a roof is necessary, so we do the development. Can the customer work without this integration? Yes, we're not going to do it directly. We try to convince him. If he cannot work without it, then, yeah, we do the development. What would be the better approach, in your opinion? To let the sales and customer explain the workflow again from the very beginning, since it should have been mentioned already, or to just clarify the points that are unclear in the project and description internal query of. So what? To let the sales and customer explain the workflow again from the very beginning. I guess to the consultant then. Well, you get some information already, as I mentioned, from the salesperson. The ideal would be that the salesperson knows everything, but if we spend, for example, 15 hours analyzing a company, well, those 15 hours the client has in his quick start package included. But imagine if a sales needs to analyze every lead that he has for 15 hours, then it would take way too much time. And therefore, the sales has, let's say, a rougher overview of the company. He gives the information to us, and we go deeper in the analysis part when we're talking to the client. What skills do you use for to do the presentation, I guess, in front of the client? One thing that I think Richard mentioned as well is the chemistry with the client. So it depends on each and every consultant, I guess, but one of the most important things when I start the kickoff call is I'll try to see if I can do a little bit of small talk maybe with the customer, depending where they're from, if they speak my language, if they speak German or whatever. We try to chit-chat a bit with them, and this can already help a lot during the kickoff phase. And then, yeah, you just try to get to know them and like Richard said, show them that you're capable of analyzing a company, right? You need to make them trust you. And what were the 3 pillars again that you mentioned earlier?
There was knowledge, benevolence, and integrity.
Yeah, so basically as soon as you can fulfill 2 or 3 of those pillars, then the customer is going to trust you, and the presentation or the kickoff methodology or the kickoff call with him will be fluent, and the implementation afterwards as well. And then the last question, so you signed the project before doing the analysis, then how do you make the estimation and make sure that that it is transparent for both you and the customer in terms what it will cost? We don't do a full analysis, or the salespeople don't do a full analysis. They do an overview with the customer and see if it is feasible or not. And afterwards, the analysis we are going to do is to implement it. You don't need a full-time 50-hour analysis to see if the customer can work with Odoo or not. Of course, it can happen, like I mentioned, you can have blocking points sometimes, depending on what the customer wants, maybe if the customer didn't mention it. But based on our experience, this is the best approach. Like I said, on our experience, maybe there are better approaches, but for us, it's pretty good. We have a pretty high success rate with that, and the sales analyses are also not bad. It's just they are rough. They see, can this customer work with Odoo? If yes, he's going to sign them, and if no, the sales are not going to push them to sign. So their first work is really finding out, can you work with Odoo, yes or no? And afterwards, the estimation of the hour pack, it's also based a lot of experience. So if we have, for example, a salesperson that joined us recently, we have the pre-sales ticket, as I mentioned before, so they can ask us, based on your experience, how much hours should I propose to the client? Of course, the hours that we propose are always an estimate, so it can be more, it can be less, but you can always buy a smaller pack afterwards if you notice that you have not enough hours. One thing that's also pretty nice to know, when we're implementing a project and the implementation is going well, it's rarely an issue for the client to buy an hour pack. So if they see, okay, everything is going fine, they've got to buy 25 hours, for example, or 50 hours to finish the implementation as well. That was everything on the pad. If nobody has a question here, I think that's it for today then. No one? All right, well, thank you very much and have a nice day.